Yeah, I'm Veronica Broskovetz, and today I'm going to be discussing about how studying abroad and interning abroad allowed me to develop professionally. So, a little bit about me, the important part of the presentation. I just finished my second year of undergraduate school at the University of Minnesota, where I'm double majoring in political science and journalism with a minor in Spanish. So, one question students who study abroad get a lot is, why did you study abroad? And for me, that question always seemed so obvious. But I also have to reflect on my background a little bit here. Growing up, my father was in the Air Force, meaning our family moved around every 2 to 3 years. So for example, I was born in Florida, and then we did England, Japan, North Carolina, back to Japan, and then finally Minnesota when he retired in 2020, so midst of the pandemic. And of course, Minnesota, after living in Okinawa, Japan for a total of 6 years, I thought, ugh, how lame. So I had been plotting on studying abroad for quite some time. Now don't get me wrong, after living in Minnesota for 5 years, I've definitely grown to acknowledge its perks, but if you were to ask me this in January or February, I would have a different answer for how I like living in Minnesota. However, I came with the intention of studying abroad with two main goals. One, to develop professionally, and two, to practice my Spanish. So this is initially what made me decide on Barcelona, Spain specifically. They had the internship program, and of course it's in Spain, so I'd be able to practice my Spanish. I'm quite academically motivated, and so I definitely did not want to fall behind the learning curve when it came to developing professionally. Maybe I jumped the gun on this considering I was a sophomore, but I was just so excited to get involved. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the application process. Again, I had to apply through the University of Minnesota, but that was a pretty quick application process, and once they accepted me, I was transferred to the CEA CAPA side of things pretty seamlessly. And they overtook everything from orientations about the fun cultural excursions, and even with my internship application as well, which is one thing I wanted to really emphasize in this slide because it was such a big part of my study abroad experience. So with the internship application process, I had to do what you would do for a normal job. I had to submit my resume, cover letter, I had to answer some questions about my previous work experiences, and I even had to submit a short video of myself speaking Spanish, answering professional work-oriented questions. I feel really bad for whichever native Spanish speaker had to watch that video. It was in the middle of summer and my skills were still a little rusty, but those were just some things that I had to do. Once CEA CAPA reviewed my application, I was then placed into an interview with a prospective host. I will go more into that a little bit later, but essentially they approved me and I was good to go in that sense. And then I also chose to do a homestay placement. That was a couple of the same things, a couple questions, and then it was pretty much go time. Now the internship, that's the important part of this whole thing. I interned for a nonprofit organization based out of Barcelona called Homeless Entrepreneur, and essentially their goal is to eliminate homelessness within the EU. And they do that through a model of empowerment. A lot of the models for helping the homeless right now are through assistance-based needs. So for example, food, clean water, shelter, housing, things like that. And while those are all great, they are at the end of the day short-term solutions for a much larger global problem. And so that's where that organization came in. They made sure to supply people within their program with professional and cultural resources to allow them to develop professionally, so it creates a more long-term solution of these people finding jobs and careers. Now my role in this organization was as a social policy intern, which sounds really serious and professional, I know. But some of my roles within this were researching, interviewing, fundraising, and writing. The first time I met with my supervisors was the first day of classes, and it was really only an hour. It was an orientation, but with a nonprofit that has its roots in multiple cities across the EU, it was definitely a very large and overwhelming process walking into this first meeting with them. I don't know if you guys have seen a Gantt chart. I assume many of you have. It is the scariest thing in the world. I had just moved abroad, I had just met my host family, and then I'm looking at a Gantt chart with a bunch of tiny words of all the tasks I need to do throughout the next 12 weeks. So I was super overwhelmed, and I almost faced a bit of imposter syndrome. The only work experience I had had before up until that point was working as a Starbucks barista. So I knew how to make a mean latte, but I didn't necessarily know the ins and outs of social policy, not even in America, but also surely not within the EU. So that first meeting was definitely making me doubt my intentions of going abroad. Was I ready to really immerse myself professionally while managing 16 credits back at the study center? So I set up a meeting the next day with my supervisor, and I was able to ask her all of my questions and really understand my tasks a lot better. My initial fears with scheduling that second meeting was, oh, is she gonna think I'm stupid or that I wasn't paying attention during the first meeting? And I'm so glad I overcame those fears because it actually helped develop my relationship with my supervisor even better. She actually appreciated that I was curious to know more about the organization and even more so about my tasks throughout the following weeks. One thing that I am super proud of throughout this internship experience was at the end, throughout all of my interviewing other local professionals, both within the EU and in Barcelona, Spain, was that I was able to gather that data, research, and interviews that I had gathered and put it into an article. So my focus was on who is responsible for the homelessness in Brussels. Now, Brussels, we're in Barcelona, a little bit of a stretch, but Brussels is a really, really powerful city in this social policy world because so much of the EU Parliament plenaries and meetings take place in Brussels. So that's kind of why I focused on that area. However, there would be no chance that I would have managed this internship, which was 20 hours a week, along with 16 credits, if I was not paired with the Global Internship Course, or GIC. And this was a class that met once a week, and there were three main things I got from this class. One was a great sense of community. I am somebody that is very prone to FOMO. And so it's so weird having FOMO of other people in your same exact study abroad program when you're in this beautiful city like Barcelona, but to me it seemed like everybody else was having so much fun. And here I was going to networking events. But having a community of other interns that were facing the same sense of overwhelming or imposter syndrome and being able to discuss our different experiences and exchange those was really powerful, as well as having a professor that understood the workload and the hour demands that we were under. Secondly, research. This kind of falls under the critical thinking and intellectual curiosity student learning and development objective. So we had to construct a research presentation, and the topic I chose was the different work cultures between the US and Spain. So automatically within this first semester, my internship was already helping me academically. I had to take meeting notes, I had to interview 2 different professionals, which again, I had experience from due to my internship. I also had to construct that article and present it in front of my class. Again, I had already had experiences like this within my internship that were giving me a great chance to present in my own class, and I got an A on that presentation, thankfully. Lastly, development, career and professional development. I've gotten sick of saying these words, but it is so, so important to me because this class also covered the more technical things. So for example, resume building, how to make your cover letters more efficient so you're not just saying a whole lot of nothing about why you want to work somewhere, and also interview practice, because a good resume and a cover letter won't exactly always land you a job. You have to be confident in an interview, and you need to know how to speak about your skills in a way that applies them to a new position. So those were all things that I'm very, very grateful for and that have actually continued to help me today. Now, I took GIC as well as some other classes at the study center. When I originally chose the CEA CAPA program because of its location and internship, I was a little worried about the cultural bubble I might be in, being surrounded by other Americans in an English-speaking environment. Because again, one of my goals was still studying and learning Spanish. And whenever I talk to a bilingual or native Spanish speaker and ask them for advice with learning another language, it's always immersion, which is so frustrating when you're living in the United States. So I really did not want to go all the way across the Atlantic just to not speak Spanish or get embarrassed to do so. So I was really, really concerned about this. However, once I got there, I realized it was less of a bubble and more of a refuge for its students. And it actually empowered me to venture outside just the city center. So for example, this is actually my view from my Spanish classroom, which is pretty cool. But having the study center in the city center was one, super convenient for students living in both homestays and apartments, but it also was a great location for getting your basic needs met. So Wi-Fi, water, bathrooms, power, outlets, food. I don't know how many of you guys have been to Spain or Europe in general, but public restrooms are quite a hassle to find, especially if it's 90 degrees and your water bottle is empty. So again, having my basic needs met, but also having my emotional and mental needs met through the amazing staff that was there. I could ask them about any cultural or linguistic questions I had, or even food recommendations, competitions or cultural excursions. I could ask them all of those questions, and I felt comfortable doing so. So that's something that really, my mindset about the study center changed as soon as I got there. Less of a bubble and more of a safe place. Secondly, my second safe space within this gigantic city was my homestay. Again, I was serious about the Spanish, so I chose to do a homestay, and I highly recommend it to other people. And there I was with an amazing host mom and my roommate, Rachel. And then, of course, the rescue dog, Croqueta. She was the best thing to practice Spanish with because she did not critique my grammar at all. She just sat there and listened. It was about a 20-minute commute from the study center. And again, this gave me the cultural immersion that I was looking for. Not to say that the study center, I popped that bubble and I did everything in my power to do so, but CEA CAPA also assisted in that process. They set out actually a little cooking challenge with the homestay students for who could make the best traditional Spanish dish, and we won. We made a Spanish tortilla, yes. It's very good. I recommend if you're ever in Spain. But that, again, really allowed me the chance to be able to adapt, be flexible, and be really persistent in the goals that I had gotten there. So as you can see, not only did I develop professionally, obviously through my internship and networking and having to actually do a job, but the homestay as well gave me those skills that I can now transfer into other positions. And then finally, having both of those safe spaces that I could ask questions and really be myself in allowed me and gave me the confidence to explore out on my own. So not only did I do the basic traveling on my own to like Sevilla, Costa Brava, other countries in the EU, I also really utilized, I believe I did every single one of the CEA CAPA field trips and cultural activities. So for example, here we have the Castellers, which is a human tower, part of Catalonian culture, and that is just terrifying to watch. I feel like I am a little bit of a nervous person, so seeing people climb on top of each other and having the person at the top be a 5-year-old was incredible to see. We also made panayets, which took place in the study center. It's a traditional Catalan dessert made in the fall. We also went on different excursions through CEA CAPA, such as to the Pyrenees, Girona, Madrid, pretty much all over. Now, looking forward, this is the important part. My study abroad was only about 3 to 4 months, and as much as I miss it, it is crazy how the skills and things that I learned there will continue to affect me for years to come. For example, the skills gained, just a quick recap. Throughout my internship, I had to interview people within the social policy field about what they were doing, recommendations they had, and how their city was dealing with homelessness. For example, meeting notes. I didn't even know that was something you had to do. I was just going to go in and ask them all of my questions. But being able to connect with people and get over that initial fear of embarrassment of, oh, what are they going to think of me? Like, I'm a student. Like, why would they want to talk to me? Getting over that, it was so silly. I've matured so much since then. But that, for example, being adaptable to a new style of leadership. Again, being from, Starbucks, where my schedule was exact, that my tasks were exact. It was all pretty straightforward, to being in a more flexible work environment is something that's really, really beneficial in multiple fields, not just political science. And now, again, through the GIC course, I'm able to now process those skills that I've learned and, again, put them into 3 to 4 bullet points, which is actually incredibly hard if you take 240 total hours of internship experience into just 3 bullet points on your resume. And then, again, actually applying those. Secondly, utilizing connections. LinkedIn was something I was not a fan of in the beginning. It was not my favorite form of social media, I'll just say that. But utilizing connections is something that, again, I gradually had to learn how to do, because the 500 plus looks great, but if you don't know any of those people, or if you're not asking them and interacting with them about their professional life or your own, there's really no use for that. So utilizing connections, and I have actually had done that since. That's how I got my second internship in the spring, was by connecting with somebody on LinkedIn, thank you, connecting with somebody on LinkedIn, asking about their position, and learning a little bit more about that. And even if it doesn't get me to where I want to go, for example, a new internship, it certainly gets more experience about the job that they're doing. And as a student who's still figuring out what they want to do in the future, that was really, really beneficial for me to gain that skill. And then third, finally, future positions. As I mentioned, this internship was in the fall. I got a new internship in the spring, and that was totally different. It worked with local politics in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But again, because I knew how to frame those skills in a way that made the employer that I was interviewing with intrigued, they actually did ask about the internship, thankfully. I was able to feel much more confident as well in the internship process and the interview process. So overall, again, even though this is such a short period of my life looking back, I know that these skills and these experiences will continue to benefit me in the future. And not only professionally, but academically as well. Before, I was just studying Spanish and political science. But after this internship, I realized journalism is actually kind of fun. I really enjoy writing and being able to take what I've gathered in the field and tell other people about it. So that's what I added my second major for. So I'm really excited to see how else I can apply this in the future. Thank you.